So I think Archer 1999 is probably one of the greatest pieces of sci-fi ever written. Bit of a strong claim, I know, but here's why. So to give you a little bit of background to it, Archer is a 2009 animated comedy series. So the series follows the exploits of Sterling Archer, the titular character of the show, the world's most dangerous spy. Not the world's most deadliest spy, or not the world's best spy, he's the world's most dangerous spy. And he happens to work for what is possibly the most unfortunately named spy agency of all time. And the show manages to just absolutely perfectly lampoon everything from the whole 1960s spy genre right the way through to modern workplace sitcoms. It is simultaneously probably the most densely written sitcom I have ever watched. The dialogue on it is absolutely awesome. I describe the dialogue of Archer as sumptuous. It's characterised by this sort of really rapid fire wit, but it's also got this really great way of like foreshadowing everything that's about to happen. For instance, Archer and Lana will be having a big old argument with each other about something, and it'll be like, you should be really sorry for that. And just as the character's about to say the word sorry, or refuse to say the word sorry, it'll cut to another character like Cyril, sort of crying his eyes out and telling everybody how sorry he is for something. And each supporting character in it as well, they're just perfect. They're absolutely brilliant. They've had so much growth over the course of the series that you've grown to love them as well. Like every other animated sitcom since The Simpsons, is full of pop culture references. But hey, this is a sci-fi channel. What am I doing talking about an animated sitcom about a group of spies? Hang on, I'll come to it. Well, Archer started out life as a send-up of that entire 1960s spy genre. And that was completely for science fiction. Everything from James Bond, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., even the Icarus File and Harry Palmer films were full of science fiction. Michael Caine famously sent the world's first email in the film $1 Billion Brain. I mean, James Bond as well, come on. All them gadgets he had, hollowed out volcano layers that you can launch rockets from. He nearly got cut in half with a laser, for Christ's sake. So from the outset, Archer had carte blanche to go and explore this genre. And we do get it throughout the early season. We get everything from insane scientists up on space stations, to insane scientists on deep sea labs, to insane robots and insane robotic wives. I do hasten to add though, it's not just science fiction Archer does. Archer hits on so many beats, on so many other different genres, it's hard to count. And it is possibly one of the bravest shows for doing that as well, for genre hopping, so to speak. For what is something that is ostensibly a send-up of the spy genre, it pretty quickly branches off into like a workplace sitcom, but then goes completely left field. We get adventures where they're drug dealers, for instance, for an entire series. And later on, following another sci-fi misadventure, a la Fantastic Voyage, they have to go and start a private detectives agency in Los Angeles, which brings me neatly on to what I want to discuss. So during the course of that series, where they're private detectives, Archer gets brutally shot and left for dead. Not for the first time, by the way, and possibly certainly not for the last time. I actually think there's a robot in that episode as well, possibly lots of them. Because he's been shot and left for dead, he goes into a coma, and that coma lasts for 3 whole years. But that means for 3 whole seasons, Archer, yet again, is free to explore other genres. The first of these is Archer Dreamland, which is basically a film noir spread out over the course of the season. The following season to that is Archer Danger Island, and that's possibly my favourite of all of the Archer seasons. It's set on some idyllic South Sea island during the late 1930s. But what I really want to talk about is Archer 1999. I've got a bit of a thing about that year, ain't I? I think because I turned 13 and everything just went a bit topsy-turvy for me. In this series, we find ourselves in outer space. So this is real sci-fi now, and it really hits every sci-fi beat. And when I say that, I mean that. This is dense science fiction going on here. A lot of it is really well camouflaged as well. You have to really sort of be on the ball with Archer because, again, the dialogue is so fast-paced. So in this series, we find Archer in co-command of a sort of deep space salvage vessel. He's in co-command because Lana owns the other half of the ship, because Archer had a really shitty lawyer, which is part of that foreshadowing, I suppose, which Archer is so great at. I'm going to go on record now as well. I'm going to be totally honest with you. I think Archer, throughout its entire run, was just beautifully animated. I can't think of anything that looks as cool as Archer. Everything from wildlife they encounter on Danger Island to 1960s F1 cars to speedboats and stuff in Archer Vice and aeroplanes, and even the backdrop of the show, all the cityscapes and everything are absolutely gorgeous to look at. The overall quality of Archer is really consistent, but sometimes there's peaks, and this series of Archer 1999, is a peak. And I think Adam Reed, the creator of Archer, is a real fan of science fiction. You can see that in the writing of this series in particular. So when Adam Reed was writing this series, he was fully aware that he was giving up his role as showrunner. So he threw the book at it from everything, like even with the music. So the music in Archer is always great. From the very beginning, it's always been great. But for this series, they reworked the theme tune. They did it for the previous 2 seasons as well, into genre-specific kind of music. But for this one, we get a sci-fi version, and the show is called Archer 1999. Well, it is a typically 90s science fiction piece of theme music. In effect, what they did was they took the standard Archer theme tune, they slapped an amen break on it, added some synthesizers and turned up the bass. But by doing that, we get a theme tune that comes straight out of Event Horizon, straight out of the 1998 Lost in Space film. Really works well, it really sets the tone. And then we get the whole look of it as well. So yeah, it sounds great, but the look of it is perfect. It's a lot of Alien, it's a lot of Ridley Scott to start with, but there's other stuff chucked in there as well. If you go into this series expecting Star Trek and Star Wars and the big sci-fi franchises, yeah, they're there, but they're limited. What Adam Reed did with this series is he hit a really niche science fiction, the kind of stuff that only real fans really enjoy. I certainly get the sense though that each episode of this, Adam Reed is trying to write an episode of other science fiction franchises. And by that I mean, I'll get the sense that certain episodes are meant to be an episode of Farscape or Lex or Blake 7. And don't get me wrong, he doesn't completely eschew the big franchises. As I mentioned, Star Wars and Star Trek are there. I mean, there's an entire Star Wars episode to it, the episode Space Pirates. But then you get episodes like Dining with the Zarglor, and that's just a complete Lovecraftian horror. And it ain't just Lovecraft and Star Wars, it's Red Dwarf. There's 2 episodes of that series that are written like Red Dwarf. You've got The Leftovers and you've got Mr. Deadly Goes to Town, and both of them are pure Red Dwarf. The episode Cuba starts out as a complete homage to 2001: A Space Odyssey, and in the final episode as well, the episode's called Robert De Niro, they recreate the scene from Aliens with the sentry guns. A little bit of context to that. Now, for me, my generation, the DVD generation, we can't picture Aliens without the sentry guns in them, because it's one of the most iconic scenes of science fiction. But that scene was cut from the cinematic version of it, in what was possibly one of the biggest wastes in cinematic history. And Archer manages somehow to make a complete joke out of that whole situation. So what they actually do is they completely recreate that scene, almost, with the exception of the aliens actually getting killed by these guns. And they blast away and they don't hit nothing. And Archer's like, well, we hit nothing, that was a waste. Then it cuts to the aliens and they're like, that's a waste. And it cuts back and Archer's like, well, what was the point of that? And Krieger's like, I don't know, director's cut. That's a really clever blink and you miss it kind of joke. And the humour isn't restricted to the dialogue neither. There's some really great visual humour here as well, and some great callbacks going on. In the episode Happy Birthday, for instance, the crew end up in some sort of gladiatorial contest, or end up having to really have a go at each other. It's the last man standing. And they're put in these gladiator-esque kind of outfits. And if you look at the bottom half of Cheryl/Carol's outfit, it's kind of evocative of something. And if you look at the bottom half of Cyril's outfit, it's a definite callback because Cyril legendarily has a huge penis. The design of the outfits is there. Again, subtle, blink and you miss it, but it's there. But I can already hear you typing, banging away with your comments. Hey, British Sci-Fi, this sounds good, but it doesn't sound great. It doesn't sound like one of the greatest pieces of science fiction ever written. Well, I'm about to drop into a bit of a deep dive now because there's just so much more going on here. There is so much more beneath the surface bubbling away that we really need to have a look at. So when you first watch Archer, you watch him from season 1 onwards. He's a cool dude. He's a James Bond-esque character. He's a little bit detached from reality, and he's a little bit of a douche at times. But he's Archer, and you know what? You grow to love him. Archer is possibly autistic. They say atypically autistic. I don't really see that. I'm a parent of a child that's on the spectrum, and I just don't see Archer as being autistic. I feel that there is something else at play here. In actual fact, there is a lot more at play here. Archer is extremely dysfunctional. He's an alcoholic, he's a womanizer, he's got no sense of danger at times. He is cut off from his peers to the point of seeming autistic at times. He's a real mess. In actual fact, you first get a sense of this when the actor Burt Reynolds guest stars as himself in it, and he actually says to Mallory, Archer's mum, hey, he's actually kind of a mess, this guy. And it has everything to do with her. It has everything to do with Mallory Archer. I want to pause for a minute actually here. Mallory Archer is voiced by the late and massively great Jessica Walter, who somehow manages to convey one of the most barbed and acidic and sexiest characters of all time. Anyway, I'm digressing. Archer is a complete mess. As I said, he's very dysfunctional, and it's because of his upbringing. He was placed in a boarding school for most of his childhood. I think it was like 15 years or something he spent in boarding school, which is just a catastrophic amount of time. He was being raised by his valet, Woodhouse, brought to life by George Coe. Woodhouse is actually possibly as dysfunctional as Archer. It is hinted strongly that he is a severe heroin addict, yet at the same time a war hero from World War I who won the Victoria Cross and actually managed to save Mallory Archer while she was giving birth to Sterling. But Mallory is the key to understanding Archer's dysfunction. She's a spy herself, which is why she was away so often when Archer was a child. But even when she was there, when she was present, invariably, because she's an alcoholic as well, was drunk and was quite abusive to Archer. We see this in flashback scenes. For instance, when Archer is quite badly mauled down below from doing something with a hoover, rather than rushing to his aid and getting his help, she's standing there flirting with the doctor and going to dinner with him while Woodhouse takes him to the hospital. Or, rather than being responsible and playing normal games with her child, no, she's playing poker with him and cheating him out of his Halloween candy. Or she's entertaining gentlemen at home late at night when Archer's having a nightmare and he's locked outside the bedroom crying. Well, she's in her bedroom entertaining somebody. And because of all this, because of Archer's upbringing, he's just a hot mess. He is a Freudian nightmare of a character. For instance, Mallory goes a bit broke once and has to sort of marry some money quickly. So she marries the Cadillac car dealer, Ron Cadillac, played by Ron Liebman, actually, her real-life husband. He actually does a really good job as well. He's really lovable in it. Archer sort of has a bit of a break because of this. He has a bit of a psychotic episode and forgets who he is with sort of temporary amnesia. And we end up getting a really good crossover with Bob's Burgers. But this relationship, this dysfunction, this mental health crisis this is brewing in Archer, it affects his relationships with everybody around him. Archer is a completely irresponsible jackass. He's a complete bully. Archer is really horrible. And as another aside, actually, it's not until you've watched Archer and you go back and watch the Roger Moore James Bonds that you realise just how dysfunctional Roger Moore's James Bond was, because Archer and that version of James Bond, very similar. For instance, there's a scene in Live and Let Die. James Bond is being dragged off to be fed to some alligators, which happen to be Archer's biggest fear, by the way. Another subtle joke. As he's being dragged off for near certain death, he's still trying to flirt with a girl. He's trying to make dinner plans with her. He's getting dragged off and he's going, yes, I'll see you at 8 o'clock and all that kind of stuff to her. Completely detached from reality. But like I said, Archer is just horrible. He's a bully. He bullies everybody around him, with the exception of Lana, who is far too feisty and far too strong for him. So with this piece of context to Archer's character, now I'm going to explain what elevates this from a good science fiction show to a great science fiction show. So one of the things that makes Archer so great is its cast of characters. They're all fantastic. Pam, for instance, she's a real breakout character. Cyril, he's like Jaime Lannister in a certain sense. And by that I mean Jaime Lannister was hated. When you first see Jaime, you was like, oh God, I can't bear him. But you grew to like him. Now, Cyril isn't anything like as heroic as Jaime Lannister. He's not heroic at all. He's a snivelling little office weasel. But you like him. Cheryl / Carol, she's absolutely insane. And she only gets worse as the series progresses. Ray, what's not to love about Ray? He's absolutely fantastic. He's super cool. Lana, one of the most capable characters I've ever seen put to screen. Completely able to hold her own against Archer and vastly superior to him in almost every way. And we've already discussed Mallory at length. But the thing is, if you remember rightly, this series of Archer is a coma dream. None of these characters are real. They all exist in Archer's head. They are all projections of his subconsciousness. The messed up mind of Archer is there for you to see. And each episode of the series is an exploration of a different part of Archer's psyche. For instance, the second episode, Happy Birthday, the characters descend into a massive punch-up with each other. This is Archer's subconscious fighting amongst itself. And each one of these characters, although they do bear very, very strong similarities to their real-world counterparts, again, they're entirely projections of his mind. This is his subconscious throwing stuff up for him to deal with. Bearing in mind, Archer's been in a coma now for 3 years. It's done very subtly, but it's there. Each character is a different part of his personality, trying to assert itself, trying to take control. Don't believe me? Let's look at Pam. Throughout the entire run of Archer, Pam is the character with the least impulse control. I mean, she quite easily got addicted to substances once. She's always eating unhealthy foods. She drinks as much as Archer, but she's also got no filter. She has this sort of compulsion. She can't keep her mouth shut. She sort of represents, I'd say, Archer's alcoholism, his struggles with addiction and everything. But it's more than that. Throughout the Coma series, Pam's character becomes physically much larger as each series progresses, to the point that in Archer 1999, she's a gigantic rock monster. She's like the Thing from Fantastic Four. But Pam in the series, she's sort of the closest thing Archer's got to a real friend. And she is a real friend to Archer. And that presence really does loom large in Archer's subconscious, because he's never had no real friends before. He's kept everybody at arm's length. But Pam gets bigger and bigger in his mind. Pam and her friendship with Archer is growing in Archer's subconsciousness. He's starting to let her in. And Cyril, now I said about Cyril, in the office he is a bit of a snivelling little weasel type character, and he does get bullied by Archer a lot, probably more so than any other person Archer bullies actually. But in this series, what's he representing? Well, I think his character sort of represents Archer's desire for validation and his own sense of identity and self-worth. all of the things that were sort of stymied while he was growing up by his mother. Then we've got Cheryl/Carol. Now, Archer is really impulsive, probably more so than Pam. He's got no sense of danger at all. And in this series, neither has Carol. She is a complete lunatic and she's utterly bored with her role, but she is the most effective person on that ship in her role. She is brilliant at her job, despite the fact she loathes it. Now, this is a real representation of Archer's own feelings towards where he's going in his life and his career, because despite the fact that Archer is the most dangerous spy in the world and has got a reputation for recklessness and getting himself into more bother than what is needed for a spy, he's actually very effective at his job. Now, the character of Ray here, he's a bit of an outlier. So at this point in the production of Archer, Adam Reed, who was voicing Ray, had given up his role as head writer. He was writing this last series, but after that, he wasn't showrunner no more. And they make a joke about that throughout the series, like, what the hell's he doing here? He's not doing nothing. And throughout this series of Archer, Ray is sort of part of the core group, but he's sidelined. He's left in his room a lot of the time. Doesn't go on any adventures or anything with them. Always back on the spaceship. Sidelined. Like, doesn't do much. Now, normally in Archer, Ray can be counted on. Ray is a very effective agent. Ray is possibly the most well-rounded and normal of all the characters. They've got this weird dynamic going on with him and Mallory. They're a bit barbed with each other. They sort of got this sort of mutual respect but utter loathing for each other. I think Ray sort of loathes Mallory because, well, he can see just what damage she's done to Archer and the knock-on effect that damage is having to their organisation because it's falling apart around them, and onto him as a person because Archer does tend to bully him a little bit, and to the broader group of characters in it as well because Archer's totally toxic with them, and that is her fault for the way she raised him. And I think Mallory looks at Ray as a bit of a sexual rival in the office. That's certainly going on. But I think like she's sort of a bit conscious of the damage she's done to Archer, and she can see how well-rounded and how effective and how much of a great person Ray actually is. And that winds her up a little bit. She's angry about that because Archer isn't that guy and it's her fault. But in the context of this series, in Archer 1999, which is all, again, projections of Archer's subconscious, Ray's sidelined throughout the entire series. This well-rounded part of him, this sane, normal part of him, is pushed to one side for the absolute clown show what is going on inside his head. Now we've got Krieger. Krieger is the scientist of the gang. In real world, non-coma Archer, Krieger's like Q from James Bond. Brings up all the gadgets and gizmos that they all use. And one of Archer's biggest fears, apart from alligators, crocodiles and brain aneurysm, is artificial life forms, is robots. Although this is a phobia that he managed quite easily to forget very quickly when Krieger built a cybernetic version of his dead wife, who happened to be insanely hot. And in Coma Archer, in Archer 1999, Krieger is an artificial life form himself. Think Bishop from Aliens. He even bleeds like Bishop does. It's all white gunk and crap like that comes out of it. He's still as evil. He's still as morally bankrupt. He's still constantly scheming and coming up with weird inventions that are completely unethical. But what's going on with the character is really clever, because never in the main series of Archer is everybody so sort of united and contemptuous of him. Normally Krieger is seen as that weird mate that everybody seems to have, apart from me. Yeah, they find him a bit creepy, but, you know, he's your mate nonetheless. But in this series, they loathe him. They treat him with contempt. They have no respect for Krieger here at all. They tolerate him. And I think that's important. I think that is speaking to Archer's fear of cybernetics and robots and artificial life forms. But I think on a more profound level, it's talking to the fact that Archer is being kept alive in the real world by artificial means. He's on life support machine. He's in a coma. He can't survive without this. So by treating Krieger in this fashion, what we're seeing is Archer's loathing of this fact that he's dependent on this technology to live, but also a sort of tacit acceptance that it's going to have to be that way while he's in this coma. Now, I'll talk about Mallory and Lana in a minute because they are just so super important to the argument I'm making here. But I want to touch on two of the guest characters we get in this series as well. Now, in the episode Dining with the Zarglorp, I mentioned it earlier on, it's the Lovecraft episode. It's the one I said was like a bit of like a Red Dwarf episode, but in a Lovecraftian style. The main guest character we're introduced to here is Captain Price. Now, again, let's remember, this isn't a real character. This has just been thrown up from Archer's subconsciousness. This entity from his mind has taken the form of this Captain Price. Now, her crew and her ship have also been swallowed by the space snail. But as the episode progresses, her flaws become very apparent. And it becomes apparent that she's convinced her crew to top themselves so that she can live. She even goes as far as to try and convince Cyril to unalive himself. And at the end of the episode, we get one of the biggest character moments in the entire run of Archer. But again, it's just written so well, and it's all done so subtly. If you blink and you'll miss it, but this is great. Archer confronts her and says, "Captain Price, you're a vain, egotistical megalomaniac, and you got everybody around you killed, and you killed your own crew. You are the villain." And without violence, just with the power of his own words and own coercion, the power of his own will, he convinces her to sacrifice herself so that his crew can escape. And at the risk of repeating myself, she ain't real. She's just part of his subconscious. Archer's confronting part of himself, and he's letting that bit of himself go. He's letting a little bit of himself die so that the rest of him can grow. All this in an episode of a television show about spies that was written as if it could be Red Dwarf, as if Red Dwarf was written by Lovecraft. Genius. I hope you're watching Adam Reed, because the only other person I fanboy like this over is David Bowie. And then we've got the episode Mr. Deadly Comes to Town. Again, I describe this as a bit of a Red Dwarfy episode. The crew encounter a sentient doomsday weapon whose only desire is to detonate. He's lived for over 1,000 years now. He's utterly bored. He wants to detonate. And obviously the crew can't let that happen. One, because quite selfishly it'd take him with them. And two, we're starting to see a little bit of growth around Archer and his morals since he let Captain Price go. In that they really don't want this weapon to vaporise several culturally advanced societies that may be in their local area, even though at the end of the episode this does unfortunately happen. So I think what's going on with Mr. Deadly, this doomsday weapon, I think he's sort of meant to be Archer himself. Archer's had enough. He's just been a spy for so long, he's been in so many scrapes, he's utterly bored with it at this point. That's why he half-asses it all the time. He just doesn't care. And he just craves this escape. He wants one person to say the words to him, "Please detonate," so he can finally explode and become the worst version of himself and be totally self-destructive and ultimately unalive himself. But at the same time, remember I said Archer's really good at foreshadowing? And we're starting to see the rest of the crew being better versions of themselves, being quite effective, sort of reflecting what's going on in the real world right now outside of Archer's coma, because we all know what happens in the next series. But now we've got the big two, what this series is all about. We've got Lana and we've got Mallory, or Mother, in this series. Now, I've already spoken at length about Mallory, or Mother, in this series, and her dynamic with Archer and the damage that dynamic caused to Archer. I haven't really touched on Lana though. Lana is so important to this series, and there's many reasons for this. But what I think is going on here is chiefly, on the surface of it, if we're talking that these are sort of projections of Archer's subconscious, Lana keeps on talking about wanting to go home. throughout the series, it's a bit of a running theme. She wants to return to Earth, give up this life. Archer wants to wake up and give up this dream world. She's also getting a bit broody. She wants to have children. Now, in the real world, Lana shares a child with Archer under the most hilarious circumstances possible, by the way. So there's that. But Archer is deeply in love with Lana. It's probably one of the most deepest feelings he's ever got, one of the most deepest connections he's ever had with anybody, apart from his mum, who shares the other half of his soul. And Mother, in this series, is portrayed as a being of pure energy. She's ghost-like at times. She can take a physical form, yes, but she's also quite capable of turning into this, which I assume deliberately, entity that looks very much like Siri when you press Siri on your iPhone. Now, normally in Archer, Mallory's there pushing the plot forward, whether it be her wedding to Ron, for instance, that causes Archer to run away and go missing and lose his mind, or whether it's one of her shenanigans that's gone wrong, a business that's gone bankrupt, some sort of devious scheme that's gone awry, or maybe even ransoming an hydrogen bomb or something like that. But it's Mallory that sort of starts things off. She gets the missions going. She's important in that respect. But in this series, it's slightly different. Although everybody can see her and she interacts with everybody just as she would in normal Archer, it's far less so. It's almost like she's a devil on Archer's shoulder. And the worst excesses of Archer's character, she'll excuse to him. She'll make excuses for his bullying of Ray, for instance, or his physical bullying of Cyril. And she's contemptuous of the other three female characters in it. For instance, she's perfectly willing to sacrifice Carol to be experimented on by Krieger because she thinks he might earn her a few bob. She's really nasty to Pam and Pam's physical appearance. And she's quite sort of envious, I would say, of that kind of friendship relationship she's got with Archer. That extends into the real world as well, but in this time it is far worse. And then there's Lana. She loathes Lana because Lana's the only other person that she has ever had to share Archer with. And she can't get rid of Lana because she'd lose Archer as well. This dynamic is summed up sort of perfectly in the opening scene to this series, where you get Archer being awoken from sort of deep sleep, from hibernation by Mallory, to go and raid some wrecked spaceship for whatever they can steal from it, whilst everyone else is asleep, so they don't have to share with everybody else. But Archer's explaining to Mallory, he's going, Mother, we can't do this, we've sort of got to do what's right by Lana, because she is the co-owner of this ship, she owns the other half of it. And it was in actual fact Mrs. Sci-Fi, she brought this up to me when we was watching it. She's like, that's a metaphor for Archer's heart. Archer loves both of them, and in his mind he's trying to please both of them. And he's saying to Mum, hey, I've got to do right by Lana because I love her. And Mallory can't bear it. It's important to look at the episode The Leftovers here, because in that episode they encounter some sort of alien creature that's laying these eggs. These eggs are highly addictive, and what they're doing is they're removing the crew's inhibitions, removing any mental blocks they've got, and letting them become, well, one, the best versions of themselves, but also enabling them to achieve their most hidden and inner desires. Pam becomes more of a leader. It doesn't work on Cheryl because she's got no inhibitions. But Archer and Lana end up rekindling their relationship for this episode. I mean, she admits that she hates him, and he's typically Archer towards her, like nonchalant. But they end up in bed together. Out of anything they could have desired, the pair of them, that's what they ended up doing. Archer is so in love with Lana, and that terrifies him more than anything in the world, which is why he treats her so badly, which is why he keeps pushing her away and acting immature with her. Yet again, in normal Archer, when things go south for them and it's looking like the agency is going to get shut down, the first thing Archer wants to do is to take Lana and the baby and have a family with her and go away and go undercover. And again, later on in the series, Archer meets a character who is very reminiscent of his mum and ends up embarking on a relationship with her, to the detriment, should we say, of his relationship with Lana. They end up on a break. So remember what I spoke about a moment ago as well. Archer let Captain Price die. He let that facet of him die so that the rest of him had a chance to grow. And we really start to see this now. At this point in the series, the characters around Archer are growing, they're maturing, they're changing, they're getting better. And then we reach the climax, we reach the final episode of the series, the episode called Robert De Niro. And in this episode, we get this sort of weird, surreal opening to it, this sort of 2001 A Space Odyssey-esque cube thing is just left there floating in space. And they bring it aboard the ship, and they think it's worth some money, and then all of a sudden it disappears. So they're all hunting around for it, all trying to scavenge for it, because they all think they're going to get loads of money off of it. And as this is happening, as Archer's looking around the ship, he sees Lana, but she's not wearing her astronaut uniform. She's wearing her real Lana outfit, the mini dress and the boots. She's looking like Lana from the real world. And of course Archer makes a joke about it, but for a second he sees Lana for what she is, and he starts to see all the other characters as well for their real selves. Not the giant rock monster Pam, but normal Pam Poovey, but only for brief flashes. And then all of a sudden he starts talking about this cube and nobody remembers the cube. It's like he's going mad, and he's losing his mind. It's now or never for Archer. Ultimately, at the end of this episode, he violently assaults Lana, and he tries to stuff a magazine down her throat and kill her. And the rest of the crew are disgusted with him, even his mother. They all loathe him for this. They put him on trial. But, like I keep saying, it's not the rest of the crew, is it? It's Archer's own mind. Archer is disgusted with himself. This violent assault on Lana is Archer finally acknowledging all the real world harm he has done to Lana in his life, because he's so messed up, because he wants to push her away, and he's just been horrible to her. The amount of STIs she's caught off him, the cheating, the lying, the abuse, he has been vile to Lana, and he's finally acknowledging that, and he's finally judging himself for that. And there's nothing from Archer's subconscious that he can use to defend himself with here. He is imagining, because he's ostensibly lost his mind, that he's got TV's Michael Gray there to defend him as his lawyer. But he's not there, there's nobody there. And again, this is another important piece of Archer's psychology here. Archer was raised in front of a television set, very lonely child. His friends were television characters. His childhood experiences came from the television. That's why there's so many cultural references in the show. But there is nothing from that experience that can defend him to himself, defend his actions. He loathes himself for what he has done, and he's acknowledging that. He's acknowledging what he has done to Lana over the years is wrong. What he's done to all of them over the years is wrong. He's growing. He's finally learning now. And this is it. And this is where we come to it. This is what makes this series great. Because for everything I've just said, the overarching message of this entire series is this. So there's another character. There's another character in Archer that's so important. And he represents everything in this series. It's Barry Dillon. Now, throughout the run of Archer, Archer has been responsible for Barry going from quite a well-rounded, normal, healthy individual working for another spy agency, and slowly but surely over the course of this series, because of Archer's irresponsibility and his selfishness and his just loathing of anybody really apart from himself and his mum, he has turned Barry into a monstrous cyborg supervillain. And he's represented in this series as Barry 6. He's a complete robot who loathes Archer. He hates Archer. And this entire last 2 episodes has been a setup by him. The first 2 episodes of the series were as well. And these last 2 episodes are all Barry as well. So during the court proceedings, Barry boards the ship with a group of alien pirates, and they are out for blood. They're going to massacre everybody on that ship, and Barry wants Archer. He wants revenge on Archer. And they end up in the holodeck, and they have this one last standoff. Archer has to stay behind while the rest of the crew get in the escape pod. They can escape while Archer fights Barry one last time while the self-destruct mechanism is counting down. Now bear in mind again, this has been 3 seasons of Coma, and Barry has appeared in each one of those seasons. He was quite a big character in Archer Dreamland. He was a fairly big character in Danger Island as well. But this is the biggest appearance Barry will ever make in Archer, because it is so significant. And one of the things that makes it so significant is this. Throughout those entire 3 seasons, nothing has been mentioned about real-world Archer. None of his memories of his previous life in a spy agency, anything. He has completely inhabited whatever persona he is dreaming of in his coma, complete with their own backstories, their own histories, everything. About the only real-world thing that sort of reflected in Archer's dreams was Woodhouse dying, but Barry assumes his real form, the red tracksuit wearing, blonde-haired Barry Dillon. And he says to Archer, I'm here because I want revenge on you. I'm taking you with me because of all the things you've done. And he lists all the things Archer has done to him in the real world. That is really significant, that none of that is mentioned throughout the entire 3-season run of these special series. Archer is typically nonchalant. He can't even remember the name of the woman that he slept with, who happened to be Barry's fiancée. Typical Archer. But is it? Because Archer's sacrificing himself. He's going to let himself die so these other characters can live. Bearing in mind, Archer isn't aware that he's in a coma. And then it happens, the ship blows up, Archer sacrifices himself. And we get that fantastic montage set to Robert De Niro by Queen Sarah Saturday. And each of the elements of that montage are so important as well. For instance, we get Burt Reynolds back again, telling Archer he needs to see his mother as just a person. Now, when he first said that, the context was completely different to it. He was trying to help Archer accept the fact that his mother is going to have boyfriends. But in this context, what he's saying to Archer is, don't let your mum have so much control and influence over you. She's just a person. She's not a giant. She's not a monster. She's just a person. Anyway, I'm digressing. This scene is so significant because what Archer has done, he's finally accepted responsibility for his actions. He's finally accepted that his behaviours are toxic, that he is toxic and he needs to change. He needs to be a better person before he can wake up. And when he wakes up, the rewards will be manifold. He knows he needs to be kinder to Cyril. He knows he needs to be more honest about his feelings to Lana and let Lana in closer. He knows that he needs to let Pam in and be the friend that he knows that she can be. This isn't the first time Archer has died in one of these seasons. He dies in Danger Island, but that was different. So in Archer Dreamland, it's Lana that dies. In Archer Danger Island, it's Archer that dies. And in this series, it's Archer that dies. But the difference is really important here. So in Archer Dreamland, Archer doesn't die because he's got unfinished business. He needs to put Woodhouse's memory to rest. In Danger Island, he lets himself die because he's got no reason to live. Like all of those 1930s B movies, that entire series was a MacGuffin. It was pointless. That entire life he had on that island had no meaning, so he let himself die. But in this season, it was different. He had a reason to die. He wanted to be free. He wanted to wake up. And he needed to sacrifice himself. He needed to grow before he could wake up. And that was a symbol of his growth. All this set against the backdrop of a comedy space courtroom drama with a MacGuffin space box thing and an insane main character and an insane robot character fighting to the death on a spaceship in outer space. That is genius levels of depth. It's a genius actually that's only matched by, again, that witty rapid fire dialogue. And I would say by the genius of the animators and designers of the show as well, because it's beautiful. And again, genius foreshadowing. Because in the next series, what happens? Archer wakes up, and it doesn't last long, but every character around him has grown into their best selves. And also, he's taken responsibility as well for the damage and chaos he has caused to everybody around them, especially Barry. Barry becomes his best friend. That's reward enough, isn't it? Archer 1999 is one of the greatest pieces of science fiction ever written, purely on the basis of the normal science fiction beats that it hits. It's absolutely sumptuously written. It's beautifully drawn. It's got that aesthetic to it, those old sort of Saturday morning cartoons that you'd see growing up. It hits big, massive science fiction franchises and lampoons them, but also manages to be really delicate and play really nice homage to some really small science fiction pieces like Blake 7. Archer is one of the greatest television programmes of all time, and it is really special to me. I'll tell you why. This is a secret, but I'll share it with you. So, over the past few years, the world has been a bit mental, shall we say. And we've all been in our houses a long time, and we've all sort of lacked that kind of connection with people. And for me, I found that profoundly depressing. I'm going to paraphrase Robert Louis Stevenson, Treasure Island. This programme literally dragged me headfirst out of the grave. It is that powerful, the writing is that good. The sense of friendship amongst those characters is so strong that as a viewer, you can be suckered into that. You can sort of feel that, hey, these, you know what I mean, I'd be friends with these. If these people were real, I'd be friends with them, despite their flaws. They're a group that you want to be around. And it's a programme that makes you feel really great after you've watched it. And I just feel that because this was Adam Ree's last season as showrunner, he really chucked so much into it that this is the best written of the entire run of it. It doesn't get any better for Archer in this season. If you haven't seen it, go and watch it, because it's bloody bonkers. It's great, you'll love it. Go and watch Archer. Remember though, like everything on this channel, this is just a personal view. Let me know what you think in the comments. I do like interacting with you guys in the comments because you're great. You're such a great fan base for science fiction, and you know what you're talking about a lot more than I do most of the time. Thank you for watching.